friends, I am Kanchan from Akunmak Technologies and you are welcome to our series, The Great Kings of India. Now today we will be discussing about Harshvardhan. In the last series we have done an overview of Harshvardhan, who is a great king of India. Now Harshvardhan got the administrative style from Guptas, but then he has touched a personal note in the administration by touring the kingdom, finding out what is going wrong, what is doing right. And to discuss more about his administration, I have a privilege to call upon Professor Binda Paranjpe, who is a professor of ancient India in Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. So without wasting any time, I would like to invite Binda Paranjpe. Madam, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm feeling great and excited once again that I'll be with you today. And it's a wonderful opportunity that we are talking about a king who lived 1300 years ago, and still he inspires us and makes us feel proud of being Indian.
Yes, I
Uh,
that is.
what would you like to know from me today?
Yeah, actually, I have been fascinating by many kings. India has too many. We have that kind of knowledge, and we have that kind of impression of the great kings of India upon us. We are a new generation, but there are many young people may not be knowing about Harshvardhan. And as we have discussed about overview, what kind of king he was. Today, I would like to know the administration, how he handled his administration of his kingdom, and what is the impact of that particular era of administration in today's scene.
Okay, that's wonderful. To begin with, let's try to understand that India under Harshavardhan was a vast territory, right from the northwest frontier reaching up to the borders of Assam, and from the Nepal Tarai region to Saurashtra to banks of Narmada. So almost the entire of North India was under one political leadership. Now that is not very common in ancient times. So Harshavardhana's kingdom was a vast kingdom, a vast territory, and that needs to be really administered very efficiently, because the regional aspirations will always be there. So why all those kings who were under the umbrella of Harshavardhan will remain with him, remain faithful to him, unless he was a very benevolent king? Because otherwise they would have revolted against him. And no king, no emperor ever has kept many rulers under his control by brute force. It is not possible. It is only possible when the king extends very cordial, very friendly relations with the neighboring states, with the states which have come under his umbrella. And even in case of Harshavardhan, we have seen that it was not only Saurashtra, that is Vallabhi, that time that kingdom was called. Uh, on the western side, Nepal, on the eastern side, he also had very friendly relations with Assam. The ancient name of Assam during the time of Harshavardhan was Kamaru. And also he had very good relation with rulers of Kashmir. The only fight that we can see during his time was with a southern king, the Chalukya king Pulakeshin II. But otherwise, we see that most of this territory was under his command, and the bordering states were in friendly relation. Now, that is one of the strengths of Harshavardhana's administration.
So, what is the impact of Council of Minister in his administration? Because
Yeah, that is.
what I know is that administration as a set of rule is being given, transferred to him from already existing system by Guptas. So what new change he has done, and what is the impact of Council of Minister into his administration?
Absolutely relevant question. If we try to see it from the tradition of ancient Indian polity or the political structure, Harshavardhana did not introduce something absolutely new to his administration. But the implementation part, that I think is very important. And that we come to know from many comments that UN Sangh has made over and again. One interesting thing that I will tell you, as you are asking about the ministers and the officials, that UN Sangh says that since all of them, they are so duty bound, they are so non-corrupt, absolutely genuine person, and because of that, the administration of justice also becomes very easy because there are less number of crimes. Why people will become criminals if whatever they need and that has been provided for. In fact, the highest principle that Harshavardhan is supposed to have followed is the welfare of the people, and that welfare of the people is ensured by a lot of welfare activities which were undertaken with the help of all these ministers and his officials, and that has been recorded very well. How did he do it? Construction of roads. Now today in India we know that many of our segments are lamenting because they do not have good communication by road. And way back 1300 years ago, there was a ruler who was so much concerned about the construction and maintenance of the roads. And then imagine a period when people were not traveling by the automized or fuel driven vehicles. They were going in bullock carts or sometimes on the backs of the animals, sometimes walking along with the animals in the caravans. So they needed resting places, the places where they can get some shade, they can get water, they can get some shelter. And Harshavardhan is supposed to have created such rest houses on the roads. So it is not just the construction of the roads, but it is also caring for the people who are traveling on that road. Now, this is something which is absolutely essential for a king who understands the needs of the people. So, I think many other welfare activities we can see by way of giving donations, by way of constructing temples and monasteries. By and by, we'll talk more about it.
Yes, so actually, I read somewhere that he's a very duty bound king, and he used to forget even sleeping and taking food when he's conducting his duties. And apart of this, I said so. I was so amused to read somewhere that whenever he used to visit any place, there used to be very pump and show drums were always. Ahead of his arrival, so that people should know that Harshvardhan is coming to meet them, and then people have the liberty to meet their king, which is, I think, is very democratic, isn't it?
More than democratic, because that was the times when people had not thought of something like a democracy, but certainly it is the one-to-one connection with the king, and that was very important. And once again I'll highlight that point, that in ancient times communication network was not as fast as it is today. So for somebody to reach up to the capital city of Kannauj and then go and meet his king or her king may not be so easy. But if the king comes to their region, they get a first hand look of the king, they get a chance to talk to him person to person, tell him about their problems, maybe if they are there, or even whatever satisfaction that they feel with his rule, they can communicate it. And in return, then they will feel nice about it. That here is a king, I cannot go to the king, but the king has come to me to
Yeah,
meet me. Now,
yes,
that kind of very personal touch
yes.
towards his subjects is something absolutely unique and very important.
Yes, I think, and that gives a lot of trust. That creates a lot of trust among the subject. The king is so humble and he's ready to help them out. Apart of this, I think he has also maintained a efficient bureaucracy, and where the bureaucracy has to get direct orders from the king. So that is, I think, it's one of the plus point in his administration. So
Yeah, and this we know more because of the distribution of the states expenditure items, if we see what are the items or heads under which the state was spending. And it is said that mainly it was spending under four heads, and one of the heads was for the payments of all these officials. So if the officers and the people who serve the king, if they are paid on time and sufficient amount, they will have no reason to be corrupt. I think this is something which is very novel. This is something which is very ideal, because if the king is spending one fourth of his treasury for giving the remuneration to the people who work for the state, that is something which the uh, king is showing his responsibility towards administration. And
So
I think that is
yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, so when we talk about administration, I think we should also talk about the revenue system. And I have read somewhere that Harshvardhan was charging very light revenue from the subject, rather, and making everything happy, every person in this kingdom happy. So people were generally happy, and there was a proper taxation. But it is very less compared to other empires which we have studied. What do you say about this?
Yeah, generally in ancient times, one sixth of the produce, and the mainstay of the economy was obviously agriculture. So the state's income was also coming mainly from agriculture, and one sixth of the produce. And we don't have any recorded evidence to say that Harshvardhana ever increased taxation. So he must be collecting one sixth of the produce, which was normal, which was continuously recommended by the texts on ancient Indian polity, and that was the revenue that he was collecting. In addition to that, I also would like to mention here that there are some religious institutions where the taxes were exempted. Now that is very important, because those institutions then can sustain and they can be free from that burden of giving even one sixth of the tax to the state. So this is very important. Secondly, we do not have much evidence to say that there was any crime of not paying the taxes, and then the such criminals were treated harshly. We don't have any such evidence. And one more thing I would like to add here, which is very unique, that any crime of supposedly any act of a person going against the state, not being faithful to the state, was not punished corporally. The person was not punished by cutting off his limbs or hanging till death, nothing of that kind. It was only the imprisonment. Now, that kind of a confidence a king, if he has in his subjects, don't only he can make such provisions. And then, as I said, that we don't have any evidence of saying that people were not paying taxes, so they were treated as criminals. We just don't see that. So, unless the taxation was comfortable for the people to bear, such crimes were not there. So, that is an indirect evidence for that.
So as you discussed that there was not a severe punishment, but there was a penal code, there was a code of conduct when it comes to practicing and serving the king. So let me listen about what kind of code of conduct was there prevalent during the Harshvardhan time.
Mainly, as I said, that we get less references about what kind of crimes were there, but but we do get references about the criminal system or the judiciary system. There were light punishments, very less corporal punishments, imprisonment was there, and on occasions the prisoners were also released as an act of benevolence on the part of the king. Secondly, there is some gray area about which the historians are also not very clear, that there are certain divine interventions sought in the justice administration. Say, for example, if a person, judge is unable to decide whether the person is guilty or not, then the person will be tied to a rock or a stone boulder and thrown into the water. If the person still floats, then the person is considered to be non-guilty. Or many such practices were there, and we do get reference to it. But exactly how it was administered, in which cases, how many times such divine intervention was invoked, those details we do not get. But the courts were there, the judges were there, the system of justice administration was in its place, the crimes have been described, and the punishments have been very well defined. So I'm sure that the justice administration must have been quite prompt.
I think I would like to conclude that Harshvardhan was a beautiful,
Just one more
renowned
thing I wanted to
emperor.
add.
Yes, please.
Can I? Can I?
Yes,
This is
please.
regarding the interstate relations. I think in today's times, when we can see that our neighbors are and India is having some kind of a little tension with our neighbors, like may it be on the side of Pakistan, may it be on the side of Nepal, may it be on the side of China. But if we see that what Harshvardhana was doing, that all the contemporary rulers, he maintained a very friendly relation. So, for example, sometimes he used the traditional way of establishing friendly relation by having a marital alliance. So he gave his daughter in marriage to the king of Vallabhi. And Vallabhi being a western side, today's Gujarat side, how it is very important for the state because the important trade that was going on from the western sea. So, having a very strong ally, a friendly ruler there is very good for Harshvardhan, obviously, because that will give a good, smooth push to the trade, overseas trade, or from the Nepal side. Or as I yesterday have also explained, and today I am saying it from the Chinese side. So this is something which is very interesting to note, that how he maintained very good relations. But at the same time, this is not the kind of friendship extended by a weaker king towards the other kings who might cause some harm. No, Harshavardhana's friendship and benevolence was strongly backed by a very huge army, like 6 lakhs soldiers he had. And he had elephants, he had cavalry. We don't get much reference to chariots in his army. And secondly, he had lot of feudatories also to fill in his army as and when summoned. So it was not that he was keeping friendly relations with his neighbors because he was not in a position to fight with them. He was very much in a position to have wars, but he did not. And it was only once that we can see he takes a very strong position against the king of Assam. And that too, it's a very interesting episode that Yuan Sun was with Bhaskar Varman, who was the king of Assam, that time Kamaru. And Harshavardhan was inviting Yuan Singh to his kingdom. And Bhaskar Varman was saying, no, 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 I'll not send him. I want him to be in my kingdom for a longer time. And that is the time when Harshavardhan kind of threatened him that better you send him, otherwise you will face the consequences. But other than that, and after that also, he's having friendly relations with Assam. So I think this is something which, as you initially said, that what is there from ancient times that we can learn today, we can take as a message from the past. And I think this is a strong message that we can take from Harshvardhan, that be strong, be powerful, but that power and strength is not for scaring others, it is for having a very healthy interstate relations. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what I can summarize is that he is an efficient ruler with direct supervision and a dutiful emperor. So it was so wonderful to talk to you, Binda Paranjpe, today, and really learn few things like you discussed about the Assam incident. It was so good. So in next episode, we'll be discussing the whole uh, army what under Harshvardhan in next episode. So till then,
Maybe.
it is so wonderful to talk to you. Till then, bye bye. Take care. Yeah.
Yeah.